What's up, YouTube? It's Joe Catchpolia sitting on the couch, making some money investing in fractional real estate online. Today, I'm going to go through Lofty's newest short-term rental. It's in Jenner, California. It's a beautiful property. Not real sure about the deal. I'm going to tell you a whole bunch of stuff, about. We're just going to go through our regular set of due diligence. There's definitely some red flags. Um, Before I get into that, I did want to mention. I got access to several more deals on this dot app site. The way to do that, I had to schedule a call with them and sign up for something to get access to all their deals all the time. It's like $25 a month. If they have like a 14-day free trial, so I signed up for that. It's still not a ton of deals. They said they put out, one or two a week is what they expect. I guess they just cycle through them really fast because there's only, still four or five on there. But sometime in the next couple of days, I plan to, start diving into some of those deals and see if there's something there. Um, if you watched my first impressions of that app or that site video, I'm already starting off a little skeptical, but you never know. So I'm going to dig into it and see. I think there's sometimes, like Lofty, there's a bunch of trash on here, right? There's tons of deals I would never touch, and then there's some that I'm making good money on. And so I think it's there's the potential that it's another site like that, because they're just trying to facilitate deal making, basically, is what they said. Like putting together partnerships or putting together these groups that do these fractional deals. They're not really vetting deals at all, as far as I can tell. Or people to their site. I mean, they had me fill out like, check a few boxes about my experience and whatnot, but that's it. Um, that's enough about that. Please like and subscribe. If you haven't already, join our Discord. There's a link in the description to that. That's just a generic talking about fractional real estate investing in general. And then I also have links to all the sites that I invest on there as well. So that's all I'm going to say about that. Let's jump into this property. It's in Jenner, California. Not a market I've ever heard of before, but I mean, you can see, like, just looking at the property. Um, I wanted to show you some of these pictures because it is, they have great views. Um, they have some great pictures. One, I would have liked to see them add some nighttime pictures. I think that this drives me crazy, right? So it's a $1.3 million house, and we don't have a stove that fits in the spot where the stove goes. Um, that stuff like that is mind blowing to me. I know it's a little bit nitpicky sometimes to think about that sort of thing, but it is something I just wanted to point out because I think that it is. Uh, it kind of points at the attention to detail level that whoever set this up might have, and I don't know, maybe they have some reason that they couldn't fit something bigger, but it looks really wonky and cheap and not really fitting for the location or the home, in general. Um, let's see. Yeah, I mean, just there's another shot of it. Um, so stuff like that bothers me, but it doesn't necessarily, if that was the only thing, that would certainly not be a deal killer for me. Um, you can see there's a lot to like about the property just from a general looks. It is two-bedroom, 1.5 bath, so I think it's quite a bit of money for property that, they only say they accommodate six guests, so not a whole bunch of guests. Um, this again, like the outside grilling area, not, somewhat underwhelming, right? I think this could be set up a little bit better for pictures and whatnot. And then, even for actually using it. I mean, imagine that. Um, but yeah, I really do, especially when you're trying to do some of these Airbnb shots, I do like to have at least a couple of nighttime shots or dusk shots, basically. But I mean, you can't argue with that view at all. And the reason I know I don't always go through all the pictures, but I want to get to one um, that they've got on here. Yeah, you can see the guy here and the size of that tree. Like, I mean, the natural, setting of this home is something that you just really can't compete with. And I think that's where a lot of this price comes from, right? I said it's $1.3 million. They're at the $50 price, ignoring the fees of when you purchase it. It's, you know, just over 1.36 million. Um, Jenner, California, right? What do we know about that? I looked it up on Wikipedia. It is a tiny town. You can see they had a big drop in the size of their population. Honestly, for this type of property, I don't care about the population trend at all. Um, the value from this doesn't come from the demand of people wanting to live here. It is. I'd expect most people that buy there. I'd expect it to be a second home or a vacation rental, something like that. You could just get yourself a school bus full of people and move there, and all of a sudden your population's right. It's actually above where it was. So, not too worried about that when I have a town that's this small, and you have a vacation rental that's truly just a destination property. Um, but in order to be that destination property, I think that you have to fix those couple of little things that you have. I think this could be a really wow property. I mean, it already is just from the setting, but I think for not a ton of money, it could be overall as well. But I also looked at Sonoma County because that's where it's sitting, and there's been relatively decent growth up until the most recent decade, and then it looks like we're starting to shrink a little bit. So that lines up with the shrinking that we have here. So I don't know, maybe a little bit worrisome, but again, I don't think that your normal demand drivers are what are pricing this property, right? Like I think that there's people that own these homes that don't necessarily live in them year round. Um, so take that with that's just my general opinion. I honestly, I've always stuck with top 25 MSAs, top 10 cities. Like I like to that's when I bought properties myself. I've always liked to be in bigger markets, and so um well, my very first market was relatively small. It was College Station, Texas, but from that point forward I always was in bigger MSAs. um and it just came from the being working on the commercial side of things. That was something that we just always focused on, right? I think the bigger markets are a little bit more stable and maybe more predictable, right? Where you can have um I mean, it's just so few people. I don't know. So just be perfectly frank, I don't know how I feel about any of that data. um as far as that goes. Oh, this was the guy who brought it to the platform, the co-owners LinkedIn profile. He has really impressive work history. He was a founder at Core Logic, which I've used that in many different places where I've worked, and also the founder of CRE Intelligent, which I've used this somewhere too. Some place that I worked, we use that. Um, so the guy is has had an impressive career, founded some companies. I don't know that that necessarily means he's super well suited for Airbnb management, but he has been hosting properties for 9 years, 336 reviews. It's not a ton of reviews for that period of time, but maybe it's not very many properties. Well, actually, this isn't him. This is just this property. So those two things aren't necessarily related. So, but 4.9 stars out of 336 reviews is actually amazing. Um, so he's done really well. The couple of bad reviews that he had that I noticed were it's cold in the winter and there's not a good heater here. And it was a little bit troublesome because I saw that same comment 2 years apart, so it means that it wasn't necessarily addressed. Um, I don't know. It is an expensive stay, and so I would want, but maybe they're expecting you to use the wood stove and the fireplaces, to their full extent, and that gets you there. I don't know. I don't know. I'm curious if there's some other issue there. But that was really the only comment. I mean, there was one about the Wi-Fi being down from a storm, and what are you going to do? So I mean, this is very very strong reviews over several hundred. So I mean that goes pretty strong in his favor. Um, and then let's see, what do I want to dig into? Yeah, he's not charging a management fee. So we were talking in the the fractional real estate investors Discord, the generic one I have set up, link below in the description. Um, there was some discussion about this property about how like it's strange that there's no management fee. Like why are what's the thought there? And the guy is already managing it himself, and he's selling off some equity, but maybe not that much of it. And so I guess just not charging a fee for it, maybe partially to make it more attractive from a numbers perspective. Um, this is sort of one of the first, red flags that I wanted to bring up. Even though this is good for us, um, one of the things I'm always worried about, especially on Lofty, but in some of the other platforms as well, is they're doing sort of these like little, financial engineering type tricks to make the properties look more attractive than they are. And, okay, so he's willing to manage it for free while he's a owner. I want to know that that property can sustain itself. Well, what happens if something happens to him? We need to hire a property manager. Um, all of a sudden, we're not doing nearly as well, right? And so that's whenever we have zero fees, I like that, but you have to think about how does that work when how does this property operate without that in place? And then let's see, I'm going to go into that later. Oh, this is something that is in the appraisal, and I thought this is great because it's something that. So let's see. When I looked at this property, the estimate was a little bit lower. About $200,000 lower than what it's being brought to the platform for. Homes.com had a range again that was lower. Um, the appraisal was. Let me get back to that appraisal. 1.36, and so they added a little bit for their costs basically that they incurred, but they didn't do the 5% premium that you're seeing a lot of people that bring into the site. So I was pretty happy to see that. But one of the things that you get a lot in coastal areas and places with lakes and places with mountains is this appraiser is really talking about the views and how he's taking that into account when he's comparing properties. And so that's one of the things that I've found a lot of the, third party sites like Zillow and Realtor and Redfin, just the software is just not made to handle that nuance. And so like we have an area here near us in San Antonio. It's Canyon Lake. It's only about 45 minutes away or something. Whenever I go, look at short-term rental deals up there, they almost never work from a numbers perspective. But one of the things that always happens is when you're looking at values, you can have two very similarly situated homes, but the one that's has a beautiful view of the lake and lake access is just going to be so much different priced. Um, than the one that doesn't. And a lot of times the systems just can't pick that up because, it's just not looking for that views. They're just doing some statistical analysis about nearby properties. So, in this instance, I think the appraisal is the thing that I would give the most weight to personally. So, excuse me, I'm not too worried about it being, I feel pretty good about this number. I'm not too worried about it being different from like the homes.com or Zillow number because it's a very difficult type of property to price. I'm just trying to go through some of this stuff real quick. Check the flood map. I was okay with this. Usually, I like to zoom until you can see, a flood zone somewhere, but you can't always do that. And I think that this is, I think the elevation ends up going up pretty quickly. I believe. I mean, it looks like it from the picture. So, I'm not super surprised that I couldn't find one, but if I were especially if we're going to put a whole lot of money in it, I'd spend more time really understanding what the flood risk is. But it seems to me like I'm not getting one to generate anywhere near it. So and I only do that not because I'm a crazy person, but because I know that this FEMA.gov site just really lags sometimes. And so sometimes I'll have pulled one up and it looks like there's no flood zone. And then if you wait 20 minutes, it finally generates it. But I've left this up for quite a while now, so I feel pretty good about it. Um, I was looking at the national risk index for this county, and it's a very scary county, right? It's relatively high. Um, this is doing the combination, but I believe in this one it's actually helped. Usually I like to click here, right, and I believe that's still the relatively high color, but when you start to look at the things that you have to worry about, very high score for drought, very high score for earthquake. for landslides, for riverine flooding, wildfire, like all the big ones. I mean, we don't have blizzards. It didn't look like, but or tsunamis were low. But this is something that I'd want to really think about. And of course, whenever you're looking at this, um, it does, it is giving you the whole county, and so you can, there's ways that you can dig into it a little bit more if you're really concerned about these items. It's also something that when you talk to your insurance provider, if you're not buying fractionally, right, when you're buying whole properties, that sometimes they can give you a better sense of some of the risks as well. Things that like a lot of people might be, adding to their policy or something. But so yeah, this I didn't love this. I expected it though, being where it is. None of those were really a surprise to me. That they were, that you had high risk of those items. I pulled up the spot crime map. This is the cleanest spot crime map I've ever seen. And it's because you have this tiny town, and it's the people are spread out, and okay, you've got a theft and some graffiti, and I don't know what this was. This was, but like it's very far apart. And when we look at this, I mean, this is going back, 7 or 8 months. So that makes me feel really good about that issue. That's not something that I was, really really would have expected to be an issue there. Um, but all that stuff. If you're okay with um, the sort of environmental risk stuff, um, looks fairly decent. And so then I wanted to get into the number. I'm happy with the valuation from a value of the property perspective. Although me, I'm always trying to get a discount to the real world price so that if we have to sell it, we can actually still make some money. So at this price, you're not getting any discount, but at least they're not asking for a premium over that appraisal. So I was pretty glad to see that. Um, what really starts to get ugly is a couple of things. So they have debt on the property. They and I'm going to give you do a little math on that debt first, but they're also providing this rent credit to increase the rental yield for this next month to to bump up the rental yield so that they can um, pay out a 15% rental yield, right? And so, but they're just doing it through June of 2025, and then after that it disappears. And any time that I've seen this sort of financial engineering type stuff where they're like, oh, let me give you some credits up front. I just don't. It doesn't. There's no reason to believe this is going to go very well. And so, let me. Oh, you know what I didn't even do is pull up the AirDNA for you. So I did find this property on AirDNA. They showed not all the days available last year, only 312. And they said that 65,000 in revenue from that, and they expect you could get to 76, right? So let's say we're gonna give him 80 just because we're feeling really generous, right? And you remember the math we like to do with that number. So if we do, oh, I need to keep that for later, but I didn't. Um, so let's see, 80,000. Let's be real generous, right? Divided by 1362150. Uh, what is that right? Yeah, that's right. So you can see you're getting a less than zero point 0.6 revenue to price ratio. Um, if you remember what I'm usually looking for when I'm buying properties here in town is somewhere in the high teens to 20. If I can get to 20, I'm real happy. If I'm in like 16, 17, 18, a lot of times we can make the deal work, right? I mean, that's what I like to see. This isn't even half of that, right? I mean, this is just such a low number. It's really hard to understand um, how with that revenue we can justify paying this price as a pure investment property, right? Now, one of the things you could see there weren't all those days available. And so one thing that I was wondering is if, this is really just something that they use part of the time. Like if you look in August, they have no revenue, or very little revenue. Like, are they just using it for personal use part of the time? And so that's what happens there. I don't know. So I did go ahead and add up, their revenues. They gave us the Airbnb booking history. It pretty closely matched up with what AirDNA said. I think that I actually ended up at 69,000. Sometimes that happens because AirDNA is really doing like a trailing 12. Not They didn't just give me 2024. Um, but then okay, so there, that looks like that looks like 69, 70,000. I was like, okay, let's give them 80. But when we look at their fiscal year 2023 and fiscal year 2024, they were at 85,000 and then 72,000. So we have a big dip, right? And this 72,000 doesn't seem to even match with what we looked at. When I added all these up, like I said, I think I got to 69. Maybe they had some other platform. Maybe they did direct booking. I don't know. But either way, okay, these two numbers, let's take something about the middle, and that's that 80,000, right? And so you're back to that same problem of I just don't know how we survive with that. And when you're doing it, net of fees over here, okay, then we get to this 69. Oh, actually, and maybe that's this 69 is when I added those up. Um, so that is after their service fee. So I think that makes a lot of sense. But so then, okay, you look at all their expenses, you get down to their NOI. Okay, they made 42,000 in 23. They made 31,000. Okay, I never like to buy into a property that has decreasing numbers unless I have a real good story of how we're going to stop that, and I haven't seen that anywhere addressed. Um, and this is what my other calculator was up, and then I just screwed it up. So let me just show you this real quick. So we've got, let's say we can get back to the 42,000, right? Let's say this was an off year, right? Because we're trying to be really generous here, right? And give this deal the benefit of the doubt. Because I do feel bad about, always just trashing these properties when they come on, but I just can't. I'm having a really hard time getting numbers seem like they work to me here. Okay, so I'm adding together the principal and interest, right? So 3379.02. So this is the monthly payment that's just principal and interest. This number includes the taxes and insurance, but that's already getting picked up. We've already got insurance here, and we've already got property taxes here. So I don't want to double count that. And so I'm just looking at, okay, what's the principal and interest payment? Multiply this by 12. Just the principal and interest is $54,884 a month. We're negative here. If we look at this NOI compared to our principal and interest payment, this property loses money every month as levered with the debt that's in place. It's about $800,000 in debt. 791,000. It's, the interest rate. I know I saw it somewhere. Yeah, 5.125. Pretty good by today's standards. So why do I care about this, right? The co-owner pays this, right? We don't have to pay this, and he seems like he's somebody with a good job and can afford to keep paying that. Um, and I think that that's probably true. Although, other than getting his, LinkedIn profile and a little bit of a description about him, we don't get any information about his, these co-owners' ability to pay the mortgage. And so, right away, when we look at this 15% yield, that is with no mortgage. If there were an instance where, like, so for example, you have the lender call the due on sale clause in that mortgage because of the sale of some equity, and you had to refinance within the DAO because for whatever reason the co-owner couldn't refinance. Um, what happens? Well, all of a sudden you have a huge negative cash flow, right? Because at today's interest, it's negative at the lower interest rate, but at today's interest rate, I mean, you'd have an even bigger problem, right? So, from a financial perspective, this doesn't make any sense at all to me. When I look at my rule of thumb, right, my revenue to price, it's like less than half of what I need it to be. And then when I really start digging into the numbers, like, oh, okay, well, how are we getting to this 15% yield? Well, they're by sticking that additional rent credit in to this month, right? And then annualizing it, that gets you to that 124,000. Well, looking at their history and looking at AirDNA, there's no reason to believe they're going to be able to do 124,000. I mean, it's not This is only due to the extra credit that's being paid by that co-owner. And so whenever we see this, y- y- and that gets you to a 15% projected yield, right? Like what happens when that rent credit goes away? Um, then we're back down to, okay, let's say it's $40,000 in NOI. Let's do that. Let's do that math and see. So 40,000 in NOI, which again, we're being generous, divided by 1362150. I mean, we're talking about less than a three cap, right? On actual, on you know, giving them okay, giving them a big boost over last year's NOI. It's still a three cap. Um, this is why you have to be really careful when you're looking at Lofty's deals. You can't just look at this 15% and say, okay, that's what you're going to get. Yes, you are going to get paid that until it looks like June, right? Yeah, until June of 2025. But then after that, from that point forward, you're just stuck with whatever the property yields for you, which appears to be significantly less than this, right? And so, oh, well, you know what? No, no, no. I really screwed up well, that's the cap rate, right, that I looked at, but that's not actually showing you your yield because I didn't take the order book into account, right? And so, um, and that's this is the thing is I'm always trying to look at the property itself and how does it actually perform, and then okay, we can actually look at the yield too. So let's say, um, okay, so we're going to do the number of tokens basically that are assigned to the equity versus the total tokens. So let's see, 11419 divided by 27243. Okay, and now we're going to that's how much they're selling in equity. So I'm going to just roughly do 41% times 1362150. Okay, so 558,000. And then again, let's just do 40,000, right? So we're going to divide that by 40. Use our 1 over x. Okay. So if they can get the NOI back to 40,000, with the amount of equity that they sold out, okay, you'll end up with the debt in place in the structure where the co-owner is paying that debt off. Then you get a 7% yield. Well, why didn't they just bring this to the market at a 7% yield? Because nobody on Lofty is going to buy a 7% yielding. I mean, you just don't see people buying these unless they're getting a good discount on the equity side, right? Um, you see me buying into a lot of properties that have lower yields, but it's because I'm getting a really good, equity discount. And so then you have to factor that into my total return. Well, here we're paying all the money for the property, right? And, 4 months from now, our average return is probably going to drop to somewhere around 7% yield, right? And then you have to remember we're getting this we're getting diluted every month as the loan gets paid off, and so you're not getting the full benefit of the leverage um, on the appreciation side, right? And over time, as that loan gets paid off, if you were to hold this very long term, your return approaches the cap rate, which is what we looked at was less than 3%. I have a really hard time understanding why somebody would make a financial investment in a property like this. I understand why a rich person would buy this property for 1.3 million because they want to use it sometimes. And to defray some of their expenses, they might use it on Airbnb. But this is not the type of property that, in my mind, works as an investment property for a short-term rental. I mean, if you compare your cash on cash on something like this, or your total return on something like this, compared to just buying, a 4 or 5 bedroom home here in town in San Antonio with a pool, you're going to crush it buying something here relative to the numbers that you're going to get on a deal like this. And this is operating. It's not like they just have a pro forma and I have to decide like, do I believe it? Right? I'm looking at actually what they're making, and I'm saying, hey, let's give them the benefit of the doubt that they can get back to 2023 numbers. Um, and it's a very underwhelming, yield. It's really hard to understand. And one of the things too, and I think this might get lost on some people that buy these, is that 15% yield, that's an annual yield, right? Well, I'm only getting that rent credit for the next 4 months, right? And so I'm not actually even getting that, that additional 8%. Right after that, it's the average. And like, and then the summer months might come, and I'm guessing this does the best in the summer. Let's see. Well, we didn't in August, right? I don't know really what happened there. Again, maybe just some personal use. But so then, okay, so we get it through June, and so then maybe it does have a real good yield these months. I don't know. I mean, I don't really understand why August would be so low, but they might have had some other problem. But then, okay, you just drop off a cliff here. So it doesn't make a ton of sense. Um, this is a really weird one too. Like, why is that September? I think maybe they made no money. I think that might be all those added up or something. I don't know. Um, these are things that if I were interested in this deal, I'd want to really dig into more. For me, I have a really hard time understanding. I can understand wanting to own this piece of real estate. I'd love to own it. Not as an investment. It doesn't, from a cash flow perspective. And then they even are saying that they think I didn't even dig into that, but they're saying, they think that the project is going to have negative appreciation, which is crazy, right? Like if that's true, and I'm getting that yield, like what, I don't understand what we're doing here, from an investment perspective, right? Now remember, do your own due diligence. Just because that's how I feel about this, and I'm not going to buy this one at this price, doesn't mean that you shouldn't. I will definitely pick up these tokens if they ever hit the, 25, $30 mark, 35. And I know that sounds crazy to some people when you look at these and they come out at 50. But already several of these have, right? Like it's a beautiful short-term rental. It's listed at a price that matches up with the appraised price, but it's just not a property that makes sense as a cash flowing investment. And because that's what Lofty is so, the investors on Lofty are so focused on yield, I just can't imagine these tokens staying anywhere near this price in the future. And then, when that does happen, then I'll excitedly get pieces of this at a decent discount, and where that discount then means that I'm also getting some yield that I'm okay with. Um, but even then, I'm still gonna weigh the risk of there's debt out there that the NOI from this property can't even cover. Um, like I said, I mean, it looks like that the co-owner, it looks like he's well off, and based on the companies he's founded and whatnot, it probably is not a consequential payment, right? Maybe that's not a big deal, and it shouldn't be a big worry. Unfortunately, Lofty doesn't really. They don't give us any kind of info about the co-owners that we count on to make those mortgage payments for us. So, yeah, hopefully, this is probably one of the more negative ones I've done in a while. Um, I don't mean to be like I just want to find value, right? And this is just not it. Like I don't like the direction that a lot of these are going. The more you add the rent credits, the more that you do any sort of things to sort of tweak the yield on the front end. I mean, the debt structure already you know, messes with the yield. And we've seen this on properties on the marketplace recently where like a co-owner had a huge yield, went in and paid off the debt, and that yield plummets, right? And so um, it's just it's just being used to sort of entice people to buy at a certain price point. And it's why I'm really focused on, well, what are they doing to get to that yield? And is that a real yield? Is that what the property itself can maintain? And with this property, I just don't see how it does. Um, I'd love it if someone could get in the comments and tell me how this deal works. I really would not mind some pushback there or on the Discord about, um, maybe there's an entrepreneurial plan with this property where, okay, maybe I can build a second house and then all of a sudden I'm doing awesome, right? Because the value here is definitely in the property itself and not the home. Um, it is it is only 2 bedrooms, 1.5 bath. Not the nicest home in the world. Like it's a okay looking home considering it's $1.3 million. But it's because of how it's situated that it commands that price. So I don't know. I think that's all I'm going to say about it today. Like I mentioned, I will get into some of the deals that are on that fractional.app in the next couple of days and hopefully be able to give some insight on those. I am curious if anybody's got any other apps that they're looking at, any other websites where that I haven't jumped into yet. I feel like I've really, it seems like the pace of new properties on Lofty might have slowed a little bit, or maybe I just have gone through a lot of the backlog that I had. And Mogul, uh, you know, doesn't have anything new right now, so I kind of, this is my favorite thing to do is just go through deals and try to find deals that I'm going to make money on, and I will look anywhere, and I think that now that my team kind of does it for my clients in real life, and I don't get a lot of that, I think that's what's really hooked me about this fractional investing stuff. I don't know. That's a real aside. I think I'm done. Until next time, I am just going to keep making mistakes so that you don't have to.